This is the Ross Fork Fire public meeting on Saturday, September 10th from Ketchum, Idaho. My name is Andy Lyon. I'm a public information officer on the fire, and I want to thank you all for joining us. Those of you in person, you can't see it on the screen, but we have, I don't know, a good 150 people, maybe 100. A good crowd for a Saturday afternoon when these folks could be doing something else, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on Facebook Live. Currently, the fire is at 35,601 acres. That was measured by a plane that flies over with an infrared camera at night. That flight last night was at about 20 after 11, and we were told that the fire remained active till about 2 a.m. So that figure's a little out of date. The smoke has moderated fire conditions, so it's not growing as fast as it was a few days ago, but it is still growing. We'll have a new number again after that plane flies over the fire area tonight. Sometimes the plane goes down because of mechanical reasons or weather prevents it from flying, and we might not have a new number. We've currently got 632 people. That number, again, about 24 hours old. We're in the process of updating that, and that'll change in about an hour from now. We have 5 folks lined up to speak with you. First, we're going to start with our Operations Section Chief, Todd Murray, who's going to give you a rundown of what's happening out there on the fire. We're going to hear from one of your Blaine County Commissioners, Anjani McCleary. We've got Will Fruling, the Undersheriff of Blaine County. We've got Bobby Philbert from the Sawtooth National Recreation Area. And we've got our Incident Commander, Marty Adel. We're going to go only an hour on this event on Facebook and in person, but we will try to answer your questions online and in person, as many as we can. We have public information officers who are going to be answering your questions online. We'll try and get some of the most commonly asked questions from them so we can answer them here during the broadcast. We'll take questions from the audience as well, but we're going to cut it off at an hour so these folks can make the hour-long drive back to the fire command post, and right on cue there's a car alarm. But let's get started with our Operations Section Chief, Todd Murray. And Todd, I got a pointer for you if you'd like one.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Again, my name's Todd Murray. I am an Operations Section Chief with Great Basin Team 3. It's the incident management team that's been called in by the Forest Service, the Sawtooth, here to help manage this incident. So yeah, I'm going to give you just some general information on the fire of what we've been able to do, where our course of actions, what they look like moving forward, and you know, what we think that we're going to be able to accomplish here, and what we have accomplished already within the few days that we have been here. You know, and I know you can't see it from the back, but I'll kind of highlight this. And so one of the key components that we base all of our actions on a daily basis is the weather, right? The weather influences the temperature, the relative humidity, the wind, how that comes over all of that variety of terrain that's in this great country, beautiful country that it is. And so that impacts, you know, what we can or cannot do on a daily basis. This matrix, we have an incident meteorologist that works for the Weather Service that is there on scene with us in our camp. And so with all of his knowledge and information and access to models and programs that the Weather Service provides, he's able to give us a daily forecast, and that daily forecast spits out this matrix. And so we're looking not only for tomorrow, the next day, 3 days, up to 5 to 6 days out, so that we can plan accordingly, because fire is very dynamic, and you know, if we're not looking ahead, we'll always be behind, and it's not a good way to fight fire, a large fire like this, in the terrain, topography, and the fuels. So you'll notice on this matrix, if you can see from back there, when these boxes of these different elements that we're looking at turn red or yellow, they become a bit critical for us. And so it becomes potentially a serious safety issue for our firefighters, the engines, the hand crews, the aviation assets that we're utilizing on the fire, that we just really got to be heads up, right? We may not be able to be as close or right next to the fire as we'd like to, and we've got to pull back, be more defensive, and be able to, look at other opportunities where we can't go exactly direct on the edge as we prefer to if we can. And so the intermediologist has provided this, and again, this helps guide our action. So after this meeting, and after we're all done speaking, if there's any questions about that, feel free to hit me up about that. Operationally for the fire, we have both night and daytime operations going on. So most of our energy and effort is focused with the majority of our resources during the daytime. We're staffing different areas or divisions around this fire, and with the resources we have. We also have a night division. So the night division's roughly about 13 some odd engines with the proper supervision, and we spread those out in key critical areas that we feel are necessary throughout the night. One of the highest values at risk along this incident is, of course, the numerous structures in Sawtooth City, Smiley Creek area, Beaver Creek. And so, there has been some loss, regrettably, but we're trying to do all that we can to make sure, whether day or night, we've got people out there to keep an eye on this thing. So a couple things I want to highlight. We've done a lot of actions. This fire first started down here in the Ross Fork. That's why it's got its name, using local topography type features for naming conventions. And a lot of good work has been done down there before we got here. And so this fire hasn't moved a whole lot. It was, before the team got here, that this thing had enough heat that with the winds out of the south-southwest, it wanted to move up and over out of Ross Fork into Johnson Creek, and then eventually where it is along Highway 75. What we continue to do down here, though, is we know down on the South Fork of the Boise River there's a number of structures in there, and so we are doing work down in there in terms of assessing how many there is, what they look like, what we would need to do some preparations, some structure protection measures to be able to defend those the best as possible if this fire does want to move south. Up here on the sorry, let me get my bearings, the northwest side of this, where this fire is in Alturas Lake Creek, the fire has moved into the wilderness just a little bit, and we monitor this fire with our aviation assets. It's pretty rugged and beautiful country for sure, but it's not real conducive to a lot of hand crews in there just due to the steepness and some of the terrain features in there. And so again, we're in there, we're trying to monitor, looking at opportunities, whether it's breaks in the fuel, in the trees, in the canopies, and also natural barriers, ridge lines and whatnot to be able to do some actions. But in terms of values at risk, other than, again, just the unique beauty of this country, we don't have any structures out there in the wilderness, and so we're not focused a lot of effort right there with our resources. We're back over here along Highway 75. With that, I'll talk specifically about the Alturas Lake area and the number of structures and camps in there. So this fire with again, that south-south wind component has wanted to push this way and down into the lake, and it's right next to the south edge of that lake, and that did it all on its own with the dry conditions, dry fuel conditions that we're dealing with, and this timber component that sits right in that country, it is just backing down, and eventually when the wind switched a little more, it wanted to move again to the northeast. And so what we did here in what we call Division Echo and Division Mike, is we used some road systems. We did a little bit of dozer line. We're approved right here, and we did a burnout operation yesterday, and we've cleaned that burnout operation up just a little bit today, so that this fire didn't want to move through the timber with the winds out of the south-southwest and spot over the road. We're trying to keep it again to the west or southwest of Highway 75 as it runs through this country. And so that burnout operation, with the weather today and especially yesterday, we were able to do that and moderate fire behavior more on our terms, rather than the fire dictating, hey, we can't get in here, we can't do it safely, we have to wait and pick it up. So the burnout operation was successful. No issues, no problems. We mop up that edge, and this should hopefully lock everything down from basically the south west side of the lake all the way into 75. We continue to do work here in Division Mike, as we call it, which is everything in the Sawtooth, Smiley Creek area, Beaver Creek, Little Beaver, and again, we did lose 2 structures in there, but as of now, we've been able to get in here with a number of our engines, a number of our crews, mop up the edge, extinguish any hot spots that we have that could potentially flare up, torch a tree, throw sparks, and eventually, you know, impact an additional structure in there, and so we're looking really good. Finally, I'll move around to the Salmon River. So a lot of efforts been done in here with both engines and hand crews, and the reason being is the last few days with the low trough, dry cold front that kind of moved through this country, those west-northwest winds really picked up the fire activity in the Frenchman Creek area to where, again, it was running up the slope, throwing the smoke column and embers down into the Salmon River itself and across the Salmon River. We've picked up probably 8 to 10 spot fires, so they're fires separated from the main body, generally no more than about 1/4 of an acre, thank goodness, that we've had hand crews and engine personnel and aviation assets in there trying to, again, line the spots, get them so where they can't continue to spread and get any bigger or larger, and extinguish those. So everything's holding real well right now. Our goal is to keep the fire west of the Salmon River and the Salmon River Road. So the last thing I'll mention is we've got a lot of aviation assets. We've got 10 helicopters that we utilize. We haven't been able to do a lot of flying the last 2 days because of lack of visibility. The smoke hasn't lifted real well. We're hoping that that changes tomorrow so that we can get those helicopters up and supporting our folks on the ground. So.
Thank you, Todd. And I want to remind everyone online as well as here in the park that we're going to take questions at the end after we hear from all of our speakers. And I want to give a shout out to somebody that I forgot to do a minute ago, and that is to Guy Chert and his staff from Cox Communications. Guy was calling us repeatedly yesterday, trying to offer up high-speed internet connection, and a couple of his folks came down today and wired up a router for us to make sure that we could broadcast this to the world. So thank you very much to Cox Communications for the assistance. And now we have to hear from one of your county commissioners, Anjani McCleary.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Anjani McCleary, Blaine County Commissioner, and I see many faces here that I know, and I'm sure many online. I appreciate you joining us. We know that we live in the West with fire these days, but it's much more difficult when we see it in our backyard, a place that we love to recreate and that we visit and live. And so I realize how much this touches our community. And I really thank all of those who have been working to fight the fire, the firefighters, the Forest Service. And I'm always pleased during this time that we do really see very good cooperation. We've seen cooperation with the Custer County Sheriff, the Blaine County Sheriff, our local fire departments, the Forest Service. Blaine County, early on, as you may know, was able to declare a disaster declaration, which allowed for more resources. We asked the state for the governor to add us to his state declaration, and he was able to do that, which allowed for more resources. I'm pleased that now we have a Type 2 team here. It's nice that the weather has cooled off a little bit and that the fire is not spreading quite as quickly. We'll see what happens next week, but it's good to see that a lot of the protections are in place, and really appreciate everything that everyone has been doing, and just wanted to give my appreciation tonight and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as she said, we can't do this without local cooperators like the Blaine County Sheriff and Custer County Sheriff, and we're going to hear now from the Blaine County Undersheriff. And we know it's a taxing thing for small departments, and we appreciate your help.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Will Fruling with the Blaine County Sheriff's Department. I was here today to talk about 2 things, which would be the highway closures and the evac orders. Part of the duties of the sheriff is the sheriff has the authority to mandate evac orders. And so I'll start with the current evacuations. Pretty much from Pettit Lake to south of Smiley Creek is currently under a mandatory order. We've had a lot of questions about Cabin Creek and Pettit Lake. We are in constant contact with the IC. In fact, since Sunday, we've had staff that have been working in the IC, so we can speak real quickly as things move quite fast at times. The other night, we put the lodge here just south of the summit into a set evac order. Part of that was because of the fire behavior on the Salmon River Road here. And so then we have a zone south of that that is basically in the pre-evacuation mode right now, and that's from about a mile south of the lodge to the Easley Hot Springs area. There's a lot of summer cabins in that stretch there. We went through there yesterday and made contact with everybody that was there and kind of gave them the heads up that at some point, if the fire keeps moving up this hill towards the top of the summit, that would trigger that area to go into set mode. Regarding the highways and the roads, there is a Forest Service closure for this whole area that you see on the map. So all of the Forest Service roads are closed right now. As far as the highway goes, the last 2 days, I don't think the highway has been closed. The fire has been moving away from Highway 75, so there's much less fire personnel so close to the roadway. And so if that stays that way, hopefully the road can stay open. It's all of our goal to keep the highway open as much as possible. So I think that's about all I have for you guys. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, sir. And next we're going to hear from the Sawtooth National Recreation Area and our colleague, since she works fires as well, Bobby Philbert.
Hi, my name is Bobby Philbert. I'm the Deputy Area Ranger up in Stanley. And thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Not only am I the Deputy Area Ranger up in Stanley, but, you know, I've been a longtime resident of the Wood River Valley. And so I just want to start by saying we really acknowledge what the community is going through, especially up there in Smiley Creek. And it's we've had a pretty challenging week of weather up until now. And just want to acknowledge the impacts that have been coming over this side of the hill with the smoke, the highway closures, the forest closure, and folks that have been evacuated out of their summer homes and the org camps and the other places that they love to recreate this time of year. So we're definitely we're with you and feeling that. I want to mention right off the bat that the Ross Fork fire is a full suppression fire, and we've called in incident management teams to help us manage this fire because it got outside of our complexity. And so we're very gracious that, you know, they're here, they're supporting us, they're bringing in the resources that we need, and that's really helping us get ahead of where we were at. I mean, the fire made some pretty big movements early on. We had just a string of critical fire weather days. So when I look at this and I see a lot of the green and see maybe some moisture coming in this week, it's really just very welcoming to see that change. I also want to mention that all the tools are available to this team, and they work with us to recognize where the best tool is at the right place at the right time that's going to have the right amount of success to meet the objectives that we're trying to meet up there. And so just want to make sure everybody knows that we're using all the tools. also like to highlight the cooperation that's been happening with the county, with state Idaho Department of Lands. You know, this is truly a team effort. There's no way when you have an incident like this that just one group can respond to all the needs. And so just very grateful for just that close coordination that's happening right now and all the stakeholders that are involved. And I want to talk a little bit about going forward, where we're at. So this map doesn't show it, but we do have a pretty large closure in place that encompasses a lot of the area around the fire, and then also to the north and to the east of the fire. And so I know there's lots of folks that have cabins or they have interest up there, and they're wondering, you know, when they're going to be able to have a chance to go back in to make sure everything's okay, or to grab any belongings. And I want you to know that there's a lot of fire that remains on the landscape, especially in that Alturas Lake area. And the firefighters are doing some really good work up there right now. And so the last thing we want to do is, even though there are folks that want to get in, the last thing we want to do is allow you in there that might interrupt that good work that they're doing and compromise anything. So we're just asking for a little bit more patience, and we're continually evaluating that. And when we think we have a window of opportunity to get you in, if you have a cabin or another immediate need up there, you know, we'll do what we can to facilitate that. So just asking for a little bit more patience. I know it's hard when you get evacuated. The last thing I wanted to mention is that we are currently also just entered into fire restrictions. A few days ago, we had a new start up just south of Galena Lodge. It was called the Cherry Creek Fire. And that was identified as a human-caused fire, not very far off the highway there. So we do have a robust prevention and presence on the forest, on the Wood River side, and on the Sawtooth Valley side. So just being extra vigilant, and you know that the fire restriction, we look at different criteria with our partners, and it was time to just make that move. So we made that decision. That got signed today, and so that's in effect now. And then I just want to say thank you, everybody, for supporting all the firefighters out there. They're doing really good work, and I'll be available for any questions.
Thank you, Bobby. And finally, we're going to hear from our Incident Commander, Marty Adel, and then we'll take your questions.
Good evening. Once again, my name is Marty Adel. First and foremost, it's been stated here a couple times already this afternoon, the appreciation that we have for you all. We understand what's going on. Nobody likes to be kicked out of their place or kicked out of the areas they like to go to, and then the roads being closed, open and closed. But I hope you recognize that this is done not only for the general populace, general public safety, but also the firefighters. We appreciate it tremendously. Once again, I know there has been some frustration of the road being opened and then closed, and then a couple hours later opened again and back and forth. But for what we were dealing with at that particular time, sorry about that. What we were dealing with at that time, it was paramount that we shut down the road. The impact fire, obviously, to that road was very close. The smoke was very, very thick, hard to see. And then we had engines and crews up and down the road that are very difficult to see all the time. Most of those folks are very dirty and grimy, and they're not as bright and jumping out at you. But so we do appreciate the fact that you're willing. You allow us to get in here, allow us to do our work, and as safely as possible. Other than that, last thing I'd like to do is put out a thanks to the locals, thanks to the local government, the sheriffs, all three counties that we're dealing with, and the undersheriff, sheriffs. Without that intricate dance, if you will, a lot of stuff that we are trying to do, whether it is sizing up, getting information, how to proceed in days and weeks in advance, to immediate closures and the need that we have right then, it's been working fabulously. I want to appreciate and want to let everybody know that the firefighters recognize this. They thank you, and we really appreciate all the work, not only that the sheriff, the county, the local government, but everyone else here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we've been talking at you for 25 minutes here. Now you can talk to us. If you have any questions, again, we have public information officers monitoring Facebook to relay questions to me if you have those online. And if folks here in the audience, I'm sure there's got to be a couple questions out here, right? So who would like to start? All right, this lady here has been hanging on for a while. I'm going to hand off one microphone and turn on another, and I'm going to come over and be your human mic stand so you can just focus on asking the question.
I would like you to define fire restrictions for people who don't know what that means.
Okay, well, good thing I gave the mic to Bobby, because she's the person.
So we're currently in stage 1 fire restrictions, and that means fires are currently only allowed in developed campgrounds. So any kind of dispersed fire that doesn't have a developed metal fire ring in our developed fee sites. So it's even if you went to a dispersed site that had a fire ring, that is not allowed. It's got to be in the fee site. So if you're paying for that campsite, it's in that developed campground, then you're still okay. Is that okay?
All right, we had a question online about the status of Camp Perkins and Lutheran Camp. If you would hand the mic to Todd there, Todd can address that and talk a little bit about the structure preparation that we do to protect those kind of facilities.
Yeah, so those two camps here on the Alturas Creek Road in this area. So what we've been able to do, again, with engines and hand crew personnel is go in there and assess, get a good number, a good count of what's there, what it looks like, and do some preparations around that. And that can be a series of, hey, we're removing, small little sapling trees. We're making it more defensible. And along with that, one of the key measures that we try to do, if feasible, we have a good water source, is we'll put pumps and hose, and with that hose we have sprinkler kits, and so we can lay hose hundreds, thousands of feet around the different structures and be able to have sprinkler kits so that, again, we can basically raise the moisture of the fuel or the grass and the brush around the area, and also raise that relative humidity so that, again, if the fire is moving towards there, it makes it more defensible. Even if we couldn't stay there because of the safety of our firefighters, right, we can start the pump, we can walk away and have it continue to operate until something happens. But, we've done a lot of work. There's been 2-3 hand crews and a lot of engines in doing that. And so we've done that to those two camps specifically, as we've put hose lace and pumps in different locations to be able to have water sources where we need it.
And that's been done to a lot of other structures, correct?
Yes, yep. It's been done to the camps and structures here. It's been done to the historic, I can't think of the name, sorry. Pole Creek, yep, guard station, Pole Creek guard station, and a lot of those in and around the Smiley Creek area, Sawtooth City. So,
all right, I know we have some other questions. I'm going to go to the back of the crowd first. You're welcome.
Okay, my question is twofold. Number one, would you like us recreating in the Baker Creek area and or the Prairie Creek area? And number two, would you like us, Ketchum and Sun Valley and Haley citizens, would you like us to go over the hill and recreate in the Sawtooth Valley, or should we stay and maybe go south for an alternative?
All right. I think we're having a conference about that.
So the way I understand it, so Baker Creek, right in here, Prairie Creek. So to my knowledge, I do not believe they're in part of that closure, so I think those trail systems are still open. And right now I would say you're probably okay for whatever those activities are. I would mention, again, we're putting a lot of effort in here, as the sheriff mentioned, in terms of ready, set, go for evacuations, and that's not only for the people that recreate here, maybe camping here, may live here, have a residence or a cabin. You know, we've got what we call trigger points, and so as that fire wants to move, or as that fire gets established across the river, which it hasn't, thank goodness, you know, we are in direct communication with them to where, again, we would have to institute a higher level of what that is. But right now, everything's looking good. We've been able to keep things in check, and I would say, yeah, you can go do your recreational activities. They're not a problem.
All right, and this gentleman here has a question.
Yeah, could you elaborate a little more on your burnout that you did on Alturas Road? Yeah, right there, and Highway 75.
Yeah. So what that entails is one, it's prepping the road, it's prepping those control lines, whether it's a road, it's a dozer line, it's a hand line, with giving us the barrier so that we can limit the fire spread. So it's improving roads, limiting fuel that could potentially, you know, become too intense in terms of the fire behavior, or let the fire crawl up a tree, torch it out, throw embers or sparks across the road system itself. And so we prepped the Alturas Creek Road. We had to do a little dozer line right here and some hand line, and then some different two-track systems, dirt roads that were up into here that we had. And then once that's all prepped and ready, and sometimes some places in here we had hose lays. And so again, that's an engine pumping hose through a hose lay system that we're able to have laterals and nozzles to be able, again, to knock down the fire after it's been lit and after it's got what we call depth or width to give us that buffer that we need. And so we put that in place. And then the key thing is trying to do this under conditions that we feel are appropriate to not cause us any further issues. It does us no good to put fire on the ground and have this thing get, you know, beyond what we consider, you know, controllable, if you want to call it that. That's not the best term either, because once you light the match, everything kind of goes out the window potentially. But we feel that the conditions were here that were suitable to us, that we could keep it on the ground, we could get the fire to go where we wanted it, and to be able, again, to do it on our terms more than Mother Nature's terms throughout the occasional days when things dry out again. So that's why we did it yesterday, and again a little bit today, because again the conditions back on this matrix, which again this is from Sunday moving forward, we're in our favor. So that's lower temperatures, higher relative humidity, winds that are in our favor. There's always wind out there. We just don't want it really gusty, and we want it in the right direction to help us out. Does that answer that?
Thank you, Todd. If you'd hand the microphone to Bobby, I'm going to have her address a couple questions from our online audience, and then we'll get back here. And one is basically a question about why don't we have a total ban on campfires, and also about the use of Redfish Lake. We've had reports of some problem of boaters and recreators getting in the way of our aviation assets, which have been dipping and scooping out of that lake.
Okay, so I'll start with Redfish Lake. And so we've been fortunate enough to have on the fire anywhere from 2 to 4 scooper planes, and these are really great assets for us because they come in and they'll use the length of the lake, usually on the lake for about a minute. They'll scoop around 1,600 gallons of water, and then they'll take off, and they'll be able to put that on the area of the fire wherever it's deemed necessary. And they do that all 4 in a row. So one will come down, and as they're moving, the next one's behind, and they just come in formation. It's been a really great asset for us for getting water on the fire. And it's a very quick turnaround time from where Redfish is to where this fire is. So what we would ask when we do close the lake, or when the Marine Patrol is out, they usually are asking people to stay within a few, like 100 feet of the lake, or they may close a certain part of the lake. Usually closer to the lodge would remain open into most of the campgrounds. And the length of the lake, usually they're asking people to stay very close to the shore. So if you find yourself up there recreating and they are using the scoopers, and you'll know it, they'll be coming in, and the Marine Sheriff will be out there asking people to stay out of the way. We really just ask that you stay out of the way because it's been a really great asset for us to get water on this fire. So the other question with why aren't we in just a total campfire ban, And so when we go into fire restrictions, and no campfires are just part of this, there are certain criteria that we look for before we go into restrictions. And we're working with our cooperators and partners, other land management agencies. And we're having these conversations either every 2 weeks or, once we hit a certain part of summer and we're starting to see weather and fuel conditions. And so with that, we're looking at the fuel moistures up there. We're looking at what the weather's doing. We're looking at just increased number of human starts, and are our prevention measures being successful. So we phase that in instead of going straight to an absolute no campfire ban. With stage 1 restrictions, being able to have a campfire in a developed campground, normally we have either a campground host. Those areas are very close to pavements. There's a lot of other people around, and so you're not just dispersed somewhere in the woods having a fire and then moving away from it with no eyes on it. So those campgrounds are very well patrolled. So that's why we typically phase it in based on what the conditions that we're seeing. And with those conditions we have, we're just currently really coming into that alignment with that really warm, dry weather that we had last week. So hopefully that gets to the question.
All right, and if you will hang on to that, we'll take a couple more audience questions. Yes, sir.
Have any of the firefighters been injured?
No, we've had a couple minor injuries, allergic reaction or two, but nothing major. Stuff that everybody, either a couple illnesses, but they were able to get back on the line next day or so.
All right. I'll come to you. All right.
Given the forecast for the weather, and the winds are coming from the west-southwest, what direction do you see? Are we in most danger of the fire spreading to? What area is in the most danger?
Okay. Todd will take that one.
Yep, so on this matrix, again, wind direction plays a key factor. So again, this is west-southwest over the next, 5 to 6 days. So with that wind component being like this, right, we would anticipate fire spread or fire growth on the northeast side of Highway 75 where this fire is currently, and even potentially a little bit, again, with the alignment over the Salmon River Road there. So that's what we would anticipate, and that's why we're focusing most of our efforts with most of our resources right in here, because, again, with the burnout operation, we're hopefully got this piece of secure in terms of fire edge. We've worked this, again, with crews and engines through this road access, used Highway 75 itself. This was a spot that occurred before the team took this over, and so we were able to get around that with engines and hand crews. This has been mopped up, and then again, a lot of our efforts are right in here just because, again, this is steep slopes, lots of timber, and yeah, we're trying to just get that edge and push that heat back so that we don't have something torch and throw an ember across where we don't want it. So Galena Summit is, whoops, sorry. Yeah, right there. Titus. Let me think. No, we did not. No.
All right. Other questions out there? All right. I see one over here. I'm coming. I'll run. You don't have to stand up. It's all right. I'll hold it.
Oh, thanks. I believe a few days ago it was contained, it looked like, at least online, about 4%. Then it went down to about 2%. And I know that you're saying some of it's going to burn off into the wilderness, but do you have a goal in terms of containment over the next week or month, or what's the ultimate goal for a fire like this?
So about the containment, the reason it went down is because the original size, and all the containment with the work down here in Ross Fork, when this thing again made its major runs that it has. Of course, it gets bigger, and that containment just becomes that smaller piece. We are trying to, overall, in terms of containment, we want to do as much as we can. I can't give you an exact number, And the reason being is again, our focus has been the greatest values at risk, which are a lot of those structures. It's the highway access, it is fisheries habitat, and the river systems in here. And so I would hope by the time, Great Basin Team 3 is done, we've got everything, say, from the lake all the way around into the good portion of the Salmon River up into here, contained to some degree. I can't promise everything because, again, weather being that key factor, resource availability, able to fly aircraft and whatnot, there's a lot of factors into there, and so we're just trying to use what we can as we can and do the best job for you and for the local unit.
All right, other questions? Just a moment, we'll get to you. We got time, we got about 15 more minutes.
Thank you. I live nearby. I have a picture of airplane dumping, 50 gallons of water over the structures that were on fire, that blew up all of a sudden. And it seems a shame that there wasn't fire retardant instead of water. Another suggestion is for the last 30 years, trees have been killed in the middle of the empty areas where there weren't trees. And one tree'd come up and it'd be beautiful and really tall because it didn't have any competition. And those were killed. And when I asked the Forest Service about 25 years ago why they were doing it, they said for fire, so that there'd be no tree in the middle there to have the fire jump to. But they never cleaned them up and got rid of them, so then it's a big dead tree in the middle of the sagebrush. One more suggestion. There was a nice road from Beaver Creek up to the ridge on top overlooking Alturas Lake, and that was closed a few years ago. May I suggest that you close them at the beginning in a way that you can move the barrier so that you can drive up it when you need it, like now?
All right, well, so I heard a couple questions, and we'll talk about the road issue offline when we get done here, but maybe talk about the use of retardant, and then...
Yeah, so as Bobby mentioned, we have the full toolbox at our availability in terms of resources, and that does include fire retardant, right? The fixed wing aviation assets that drop the red stuff that everybody sees, and there's lots of pictures of out there. We have not utilized that. We'd need to be very careful because, again, that stuff is a chemical, and with all of the waterways in here and the fisheries, the Salmon River and whatnot, it's hard for those. It's not a precise tool per se. When an aviation fixed wing airplane is dropping, we get drift and whatnot, and we definitely don't want to harm the fisheries. And so that's why those scoopers that Bobby mentioned that were utilizing redfish Lake 4 are a better tool in this country with the amount of riparian area and streams here, because again, we're using water to fight fire. We can put water wherever we want. We use helicopters with water drops, buckets. They're a little more precise to where they can hover and drop where our resources are and be dialed in on the target.
All right, and I don't know if Bobby wants to speak to the fuel loading issue. We can't talk about the last 30 years because most of us were not here, but I'll speak to it, and you can add on to it, Bobby. The Forest Service back around 1910 decided they were going to put out every fire within 24 hours. 1910 was a bad year for fires. Look it up. And they decided we're going to put them all out. And for a long time, 100 years, they're still really good at it. They went out there and they put them out. And so what Mother Nature used to burn with a lightning strike, we put out. And then the climate got warmer, which helped killed some trees. There's a lot of fuel out there. You can't log it all. You can't thin it all. You can't prescribe burn it all, but the Forest Service is doing what they can to protect what they can. And, well, maybe Bobby can say it more eloquently than I can. You want to talk to that at all? You don't have to, I mean.
I can speak a little bit. I think what you're referring to, maybe we called it conifer encroachment. So we've been doing work. If you've been here long enough, you all know that the Sawtooth Valley went through a a pretty major mountain pine beetle epidemic in the early 2000s, and that's right when I moved here. And so we really focused a lot. There are 80% of the overstory of the lodgepole pine over there in the moraines, it all died. And so we really focused a lot of our effort working with communities and subdivisions and homeowners over there on those areas within their property and adjacent to their property, realizing there's lots of forest out there, and we really have a select number of resources. So we really focused on working with the communities to try to do what we can to mitigate what was happening in the forest. Since then, you know, here we are maybe 20 years later, and a lot of those standing dead trees, well, number one, we did free firewood for like 10 years. If anybody, you know, decided to go up and cut firewood in the Sawtooth Valley, for quite a while it was free. You could just go up and you can get your however many cords. The other thing we've done is some of those natural meadows, we tried to reestablish those natural meadows, those natural fuel breaks, those natural open sagebrush areas. If you're up in the Sawtooth Valley, you understand it's a broken landscape. You do have the moraines up there, but it is broken up with a lot of sagebrush. And so we looked at where those conifers were encroaching into that and tried to remove that. We did it different ways. If there was access via roads, we could go ahead and remove it. Some of the trees were small, so we just, you know, cut the trees and let them just decompose naturally. There were a few large ones, I'm sure, and yeah, so you would see a very large tree. And I can't speak to every fuels treatment that was out there, but we try to hit it from a variety of different ways. And I don't know, I can't speak to that because currently that's not, at least in the Smiley Creek area, we're doing timber sales and we're not still implementing that treatment, so I'm not sure on that one.
All right, here's a question over here.
Could I have an update on, or could we have an update on Galena Lodge?
Yep, Galena Lodge, again, is in, I do believe, the set in terms of evacuation, so it's not mandatory. We've gone in there with crew personnel last 2 days to do preparations around the lodge itself, and then we were getting a supply of some hose and pumps that will go in there and again do that same thing, a waterworks show is kind of what we call it, to lay that out around the lodge to be able to defend that if we need to at some point in time.
All right, other questions? Hold on just a second. Over here, we'll go over to this side. This side hasn't been heard from.
Thank you. This is probably a pretty obvious question for you guys, but from a fire management perspective, what is the technical definition of containment? If we hear that there's 2% containment, how do you define that? What does that mean in terms of your process?
So usually containment for us is when we've been in there, again with our resources, and we feel that we've done a sufficient amount of work to where if the edge, and you probably might have noticed through public information, previous maps, and I know this map doesn't show it, this edge of the fire down here in Ross Fork shows a black line, and that's contained line, meaning we feel as the operations piece of this firefight is that, hey, there is no issues, there's no concerns for that piece. Not that we leave it alone, it's that we don't feel that there will be any risk of further spread from that area. So that's what containment is that we've been able to lock it down, we've been able to do our job, remove the heat, remove the threat for it continue to spread. So what I would say is it's out on the edge. What we try to do is we try to have depth, and so you have the edge itself, and we try to work, you know, what we call 2 chains, 120 some odd feet off of that edge back to where, again, any threat from me to the 2 pines down there is non-existent. And so we've gone in there with water, crews, saws, our digging tools, Plaskeys, and stirred it up and removed the heat.
All right, we have another question back here.
I'm just wondering what your concern is on the northwest flank there by Division C of blowing up with the southwest winds and going around the north side of Alturas.
So, yep, great question. There is still some remnant heat in here for sure. What we've been able to do, or what we have in line, is again, this road system is prepped all the way to the edge, and then we've been able, with a hand crew, is to take a natural feature, kind of an avalanche chute that comes near right to the road, and we are implementing a hand line up that chute, removing the vegetation that would take us. It's not going to lock all the way into the wilderness boundary, but it will give us an opportunity that we go up there high enough to where we think it's sparse enough that if we need to, as this fire wants to spread again with the south-southwest winds, we would be able to use that hand line and the road system to defend and stop any sort of spread to the north of the Alturas Creek Road. The other opportunities that we have in there that we're looking at is, trying to do something in here, maybe in terms of, again, other actions potentially. What that is, I can't specify, because, again, we're looking at this from multiple angles, from aerial recon flights to see what we got, satellite imagery, Google Earth and whatnot, to see where those barriers exist. So, again, we're putting our folks in a spot where they can be successful and minimize the risk. Snags are a big issue in here, and especially in some of these timber stands.
All right, other questions on this side? Yes, sir.
If you look at the map, there's this big red area, but my understanding is not all of that's on fire. Some of it's been extinguished. Is there a way you could point out what's on fire and what's been extinguished?
Probably not to the level of detail that would be beneficial. So yes, there are a number of drainages, that burned what we call hot, and so a lot of the vegetation, the timber stands have been totally burned out. But there are spots, there's islands within some of this area. So I wouldn't say every acre inside this big red polygon is totally black. So there are some live trees in here, but I can't tell you exactly. This is, like Andy mentioned, comes from an IR fly, infrared, that flies in the middle of the night, and with their cameras and their sensors, they're picking up those heat sources, and based on that heat source, they're able to delineate where this fire perimeter is.
All right. This gentleman over here has another question. We have time for a couple more.
Where is the incident commander based, and where do the 600 firefighters come from?
So we have a incident command post. Is it better? Incident command post just north, just up 75 from the actual fire. So we try to stay relatively close. We're able then to get the firefighters the supplies, food, and everything they need, and then also do briefings in the morning, do all our planning throughout the afternoon and the evening. Try to stay pretty close to the incident. So
where is your home?
Boise. And then our firefighters that we have on the ground, a lot of them, they're spread out. We've got a few folks, as it was described earlier, back in this North Fork or Ross Fork, already some there, but the majority of them are up along the highway, and they're from all over the country. We called it, or we really use the phrase interagency. We've got Forest Service, BLM from the federal side, primarily a lot of fish and wildlife folks too, as well as state, Idaho Department of Lands, and then contractors as well, aiding in the effort.
Maybe it would be beneficial to talk a little bit about where we're at in terms of planning level and what that means in terms of where we pull resources.
Great question. So some of you may have heard of planning levels 1 through 5. We use this in a national aspect to judge what we have for resources available to us. So that's aircraft, hotshot crews, engines, dozers, all the resources that we use, caterers and stuff like that, as well for logistics, to gauge how we're sitting with the resources that we need. Currently, we're in a planning level 4, which really lets you know that there are a lot of resources being deployed. There's fires throughout California. Oregon's got several in recent weeks, and then obviously in Idaho we've got a bunch of them. throughout from the Payette Forest all the way across to Salmon Chalice and then south. So when we start getting into those higher levels, planning level 4, 5, resources are at a premium. They're very difficult to get. Generally, those resources are going to the fires, doing their 2 to 3 weeks of work, going home, taking 2 days mandatory off, and then right back on rotation, and they're being deployed immediately. And they're thin as far as numbers. We just don't have as many as we like. But so we've got several conference calls, and we can bounce those crews around, especially if they're in a localized geographic area, to aid fires that are really needing it for that particular time. Maybe a shift or two, but then we get them back. So.
All right, thank you. We're going to leave the last question for the Undersheriff. I guess we're getting some questions online about what kind of threat Sun Valley, Ketchum, Haley area is in, and people are concerned that people are concerned, and maybe you can talk about that. And we're not under any evacuation warning here, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm not sure I'm the best person to ask about what could happen, but it is something I get asked that a lot. I've been up there for since Sunday, and I get asked that question a lot. And the answer I usually give is I don't really know. It all depends on the weather. It all depends on the wind. I certainly understand when the lodge went to set yesterday. I know that triggered a lot of people as far as worrying that it was coming this way. That was done out of caution. There was a large wedding that was planned there for today, I believe. And so out of caution, the IC and us chose to do that just to be safe. As far as trying to predict what the fire is going to do, I probably can't answer that.
All right. Well, just rest assured that we are in communication with the sheriff, and he will be in communication with you should things change.
Right, yeah, to try to reassure people. As I talked about, we have had a staff member sitting next to Marty and Sam and some of the guys back here in the same tent, and so we are very informed about what's going on, and we can make a very quick decision and put the resources. For example, the other day when we put the area south of the summit in set, we had 3 deputies that drove there as quickly as they could to make the folks there well aware of it. They were actually already aware of it. There's been a lot of fire resources in there in the last couple days, thinning out stuff around the lodge, and so they were very well aware of what the possibility is. So,
thank you. All right, we are at an hour, so we're going to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you who came here to the park to talk and ask questions, and remind you that we'll be here for a few minutes. If you have specific questions that didn't get answered, for those of you online, you can continue to ask your questions online, and we will try to answer those. If you want to send an email to 2022.rosscreek@rossfork@firenet.gov, you can get on our email list. That's 2022.rossfork@firenet.gov. And we will talk to the forest about when and where we need to do additional meetings, and we'll let you know. Thank you very much.